Kiwis love a thirst. Like Finn, we're making waves. Generate. Switch online today.
Detective Inspector Scott Beard, welcome to my podcast.
Dom, thanks very much for having me. I'm here at Scott Beard today. I'm just day off, plain clothes.
Undercover.
Yeah.
So you're 15 minutes late, which is fine. But you said you sent me an email long before the podcast saying that you were going to be 15 minutes late, and you said you'll explain everything when you get here.
Yeah. So
by the way, it was the most coppish email ever. So
yeah,
courteous.
That's the point, man. No, look, and it's breaking news. You know, my family know, close friends know, but my cancer's back, and I've been up at Auckland Hospital all day today, having had CT scan, MRI, planning, because I've got to have radiation, which starts next month. So when I had the prostate cancer back in 2019 and the operation, you know, I was told at the time it was a lot more advanced and aggressive than anticipated. So I've been monitored every 3 months since the operation, and last year, my PSA, and I don't have a prostate, PSA still sits there, levels went up and they went over the line where you have to go and see the radiation oncologist. And it stayed above the line. It hasn't gone up, but it stayed above the line. And so I've been told, and I'm accepting it's more precautionary. Let's get in early, fix it, and radiation is what I'm going to have. It'll be a month, starting 12th of May. So, yeah, I know you weren't expecting that, but that's unfortunately been at Auckland Hospital, and the staff there have been so good. And I've been there since 8 o'clock this morning. And
why didn't you cancel the podcast?
Well, because I was sort of in the city, and it was just, you know, we'd planned it, and I've got it in my mind, okay, I've got this. Originally, I was supposed to be in the hospital yesterday. It was going to be on the Wednesday, but then they changed it. Said, "Oh, can we do the Thursday?" I said, "Yeah, okay, that'll be." I have to look after my health. And that's the thing about the prostate, you know, like, I put the message out there, and I don't want the sympathy. I just want people to know that, you know, my prostate was diagnosed rather because I was getting yearly medical and blood tests, and my PSA back in 2019 was shown to have gone up. 6 weeks later, it was up higher. And then I was diagnosed with had prostate out. And I think it's just men out there, it's a simple blood test, and it can save your life. And that's the message I just want to get out there. You know, women's testing is so much more invasive than what a man has to go through. As I say, all I had was a blood test, and that's what I've been having every 3 months.
Are you feeling, you sound really optimistic. Are you feeling optimistic and positive?
Yeah, I always have been positive, and and it may well be the medical people, the oncologists saying, look, we've got it, we think we'll get there early, and it's better to, you know, do the radiation now and wait to see. And so I've had an MRI 6 weeks ago, been seeing the radiation oncologist. I've had to have hormone treatment to lower the testosterone because the cancer feeds off testosterone. So then you have that hormone treatment, and there's a lot of side effects. And basically, I've told my kids it feels like menopause because I get hot sweats and flushes, and I can get a bit grumpy. And my kids said, yeah, what's changed? so look, it is what it is. I can't change that, but I just want people out there sort of to know that there are a lot of people that go through it. I'm a normal human being, and looking after health is a priority. So if I have to watch my diet, watch what I drink, then that's what I have to do. Still exercise.
Yeah, you're very fit. You're a fit bugger. This all feels it feels quite cruel. Like, how old are you? You're 64 now.
64.
64. Well, yeah, so you're almost retirement age. You've had this incredible life of service, like from the age of 19 when you joined. You've done so much, and it's like feels like it's the stage of your life where you should be winding down on the career and just enjoying the fruits of your lifelong service. And I don't know. It feels unfair.
Yeah, well, I don't look at it that way. I look, there's a lot of people worse off than I am. And I think hopefully I've got it early enough, the radiation will help. But I know a few people have been through this, and at the time I was of the prostate, the operation, we had it out, the indication was that this could well happen. And so Well, it hasn't been in the back of my mind. Now it happens, I go, okay, yeah, I'll stop that.
Mm.
And you deal with it. Yeah, it is what it is. I can't change that. I just do what I can. You know, I don't never wake up not wanting to go to work. I really enjoy the work I do. I enjoy, you know, the involvement I have, cases and working for, you know, families, whānau, and so they're on tragic cases, but, you know, like I've always said, I treat the people the way I would want to be treated. And it doesn't matter what their backgrounds are. You know, if they've lost a loved one to murder, then they need this wraparound support.
Yes. So prostate cancer 2019, just diagnosed shortly after David Millane's funeral around that time?
No, it was, so we had the Grace Millane investigation in the December 2018. In early January 2019, myself and the victim liaison officer flew to the UK for Grace's funeral, but there's a whole lot of investigative work to do over there. And, you know, every February I was having my medical checkup with the doctor, and came back late January, early February, had a medical, and that's when PSA was picked up.
Since then, there's been throat cancer, melanoma.
Yeah, it was it was during COVID actually, and once again, my February checkup with the doctor, and he just did all the tests and whatnot, and then he says, anything else? And I said, oh, you've got this niggly cough, but I think it's just because I'm wearing a mask all the time. And he goes, oh, and he feels, and he goes, oh, you've got a lump. So you end up having an ultrasound, having a biopsy, and, oh, hang on, thyroid cancer there. So I had half the thyroid taken out. Most people stab me in the back, so I slit me in the throat. But it was funny. And at the time, he said, oh, you've got a dodgy mole in your stomach. And I said, well, why didn't you take it out? And he said, well, I didn't have your consent. I said, like, I wouldn't give you consent. It was obviously under anaesthetic. So anyway, I went back, we took it out, and then get a call, you know, 3 or 4 days later, hey, this is melanoma, get back in here. So they'd taken a big chunk out. And they came back and said, look, we've got it earlier. It's almost, the tendrils grow down, and hadn't. And so he said, we've got it. But every 6 months, we have to have a skin check. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this stuff.
Yeah.
What this has really rattled me.
Yeah. But that is life. And there's a lot of, as I say, there's people who've gone through worse than what I'm going through. And, you know, I can still exercise. Yes, I get a bit more tired, easier. Can't run as far as I like to, but I can still exercise, and I have a good life. I have my kids, I have my grandkids, I have my partner. It's
Well, good luck with this chapter.
Yeah. It's just another phase in my life, and we'll get through it.
Yeah. So, on doing the research for this podcast today, I realised you and I have got something in common, which I never knew. We're both from Palmerston North.
Yes.
Same education background as well. So the Latin phrase "nihil bone sine labore," what does that mean to you?
Nothing gained without hard work. It's hard labour, actually. Labore is Latin for labour. So yes, that's the Palmerston Boys High School motto. And it was. I went through there. I was a prefect there.
Who was the principal when you were there?
Eric White.
Oh yeah,
they called him rector then.
Yeah,
yeah.
Fantastic. And what was your house? Gordon, Albion, Vernon.
Vernon.
Oh, yeah.
I was
a
club captain.
Were you club captain?
Yeah, I was captain of the first 11 football team. Yeah.
Were you? Did you embrace the marching?
Of course. That's why I was so good. That's why I was so good at police college when I had to march. I've done it.
This is one thing I love about this school that we shared, Palmerston North Boys High. I've been organising a podcast in the previous week with Ruben Love, who's like an up and coming rugby player, plays for the Hurricanes, plays for the All Blacks. He's a lot younger than you and I, but same school background. And in our DMs, we've been going backwards and forwards about what house we're in, and the marching. So there's all these traditions that were at the school. When I was there in the 80s, you were there in the 70s, I guess.
Yes.
And they're still going on today.
Yeah, it was interesting because when was it? End of 2023, I was guest speaker at the Palmerston North Boys High School Old Boys Association annual dinner. So I went down there, and then they had a few guys who were at school when I was there, and some of my good mates came along. It was really good. Yeah. Catch up.
So, and it was straight after school that you went down to Trentham to become a police officer at the age of 19. There's so much to talk about with you, Scott Beard. But In doing this research, so you've been a cop for 45 years. You were in the news just last week for you were speaking outside court, and it was for an offender that was found guilty for some covert filming.
Pleaded guilty, yeah. Spy camera.
Right.
Yep.
And it just made me sort of think of the just incredible changes you've seen in your careers. Like, this crime would not have been possible in 1980 when you started.
No, technology has changed the world.
Mm.
And sometimes for good, like investigative-wise, CCTV, what we can do on phones, computers, really helps with the investigations. But it also is an enabler for those, and you just take fraud scams, things like that. Dare I say, the child sexual abuse and exploitation online, horrendous.
Mm. Yeah, and other changes in your career, DNA, drugs, I guess, as well, like just the complexity of drugs and the drugs that are available.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Like, I worked up in Kaiko as a detective for nearly 3 years, way back in the early 90s, and cannabis was huge. Yeah. At times I thought the economy revolved around cannabis, but now it's the meth.
Mm.
Across society, meth is the scourge of society.
Mm. I've got a photo here.
Oh gosh.
What do you think when you look at this guy?
Yeah, that was the young constable at the Trentham Police College, because it wasn't Poirot then, we were at Trentham. And yeah.
So you're 19?
19.
Mm.
Yeah. I was at school, in fact, as a prefect, my final year at school in 1978, and prefects were allowed to hand out detentions. And so I was the first prefect to hand out a detention. They said, "Oh, you should just be a policeman." Yeah, and guess what?
Is that what you? Why did you want to be a cop? Did you want to be anything else?
Well, I had thought about being a lawyer. But I think the academics, because I played football against some police officers who were at senior level when I was at school, and they were really good guys. And I like them. And then my next door neighbour, their son was a detective sergeant, Snow Pratt, in Palmerston North at the time. And it was just that influence. I thought, do this.
Mm. By the way, I've used the word cop a couple of times, and I've noticed you've said police officer. Is cop an offensive term, or is it? I won't use it.
No, it's not.
I'm not using it derogatory.
Like way back, it was the traffic cop, and we were always just police in New Zealand Police. And I just used the term police because I joined New Zealand Police.
Traffic cops, Ministry of Transport. I vaguely remember them with the big boots.
Yeah. Black and white cars. Yeah.
So you would have been a police officer when the merger happened.
Yeah, I was in Kaiko at the time, and Kaiko was small. You didn't have a lot of staff. You didn't have a lot of CLB staff, and we worked closely with MOT, and so the merger was nothing too different for us really, because we worked with them anyway.
No one liked the MOT, eh?
Yeah, it was different back then.
Different vibe. That must have been an interesting change, because suddenly, you had police that did policing, and then suddenly you had to, I don't know, hand out like speeding tickets and things.
And take on traffic duties. Mm. But look, if you're looking to save lives, and a lot of our work is around prevention, and I want to talk about, child sexual abuse later, because that's one of my key worlds in terms of what I work in. Mm. But it's just looking at the future, trying to save lives, and so speed, alcohol, drugs, driving badly, whether it's innocent or they kill themselves, they're killing. People are dying, and you just have to see the figures, and and we're going to have a role to play in that.
I mentioned on Instagram you were coming here, and I asked if anyone had any questions, and there was actually very few questions. They were mainly just like statements, people saying, please thank Scott for his empathy and his compassion, and words like that get bounced around. Yeah. Are they good words to describe you, do you think?
Look, I can walk through an airport and somebody will stop me, or the street, someone will stop and say, "Oh, you're that policeman, aren't you?" And then they'll say, "Look, thanks for all you do." Which is terrific. But I'm the public face and have the media profile, yet my staff and the staff right around the country do fantastic work. And no, we're not always going to get it right. It's just reality. But investigative-wise, you look at some of the investigations around the country and the results they get, and they put in a lot of work, working with the families, and just getting to where they get to do the prosecution. And of course, for me, I'll never go by without saying it's a team effort.
Mm.
It has to be the team. And yes, I sit at the top, and I the media, but it's a staff on the ground doing the hard yards. And yeah, we direct and guidance and that, but they're out there doing it. And it all comes together. If everybody, it's no different from a sports team, the different positions. If everybody does their part, as a team, you'll function well.
So there's been massive changes in policing in the time you've been involved. What about this guy here? Biggest changes in this guy here between then, 1980, and now?
Gosh, I'm playing walking football now, so it's an age thing. I think it's just my knowledge. I think when you first join the police, you look, and because we deal with, 90% of our work is dealing with some bad people. But in society, they're probably only 10% of society, and it's easy to lose focus. And I think with experience, with age, look, if I use child sexual abuse as an example, I spoke up in Kaikoui beginning of last year, a group up there called Massive Men Against Sexual Violence, and they just wanted to highlight the sexual abuse of primarily children, but also women up in society there. And they asked me to come and speak, and I did. And I said, look, we get complaints, we deal with them, and we have to hold the offenders to account, and that's our job. But I said, I've been around long enough now to say, well, what's happened to the offender from this age growing up? And as it was, the speaker after me was a former gang member leader who was out of the gang. He was late 60s. And he got up and started speaking, and he just looked at me and he said, from this age here, I was physically and sexually abused. I went on to do the same thing. And so, what are we doing in society to look after our young ones? Because they're the future. And I did a research paper with Auckland Health Board, and while what we were doing was more for juries around medical examinations, but we looked at 20 years. And one of the things because of my curiosity, I just looked at where are these victims now? And we did from 1999 to 2019. And so many of them were either alcoholics, were drug addicted, the criminals lived in violent relationships, had health issues, mental health issues, and the worst thing I saw, so much suicide. Now, they are our children who are being sexually abused at a young age. Now, if we can do something now, we're going to save society so much money down the track. The alcoholism, drug addiction, criminality, suicide, mental health. And I've worked in child sexual abuse. 1989, I started working in that field as a detective for 3 years. I've been a detective sergeant in charge of a child abuse team, as it was. As a detective senior sergeant, I oversaw the child abuse team, and became a child protection team. And even now as a DI, I have child protection team, the child exploitation, which is all online stuff, the child sex offender management, so the sex offender register and all the people on the register who have to be monitored by the team. So right through my career, and yes, I've done other things, done homicides, and I've worked in organised crime and done financial crime stuff in general CIB work, but that child sexual abuse has always run through my career. And I just, as I say, when I go back to all the football coaching I've done, it's because I see that it has been, kids in sport has been really positive. It's mentally good for them, but physically it's good. It teaches them life skills, teamwork, discipline, punctuality. I was a tough coach at times. And if the teenagers, you've got them off the street and they're sort of involved and they've got to focus. And I look back and I think, gosh, can we do more for some of the children who don't get that opportunity?
What can we do? Like, what can I do, and anyone listening to this? Is it a neighbourhood thing and a community thing?
Oh, it is a community thing. Like, there's a lot. Like, one of the things I've always thought of was, say in the lower socioeconomic where it's difficult and parents can't afford children in sport, and like if you had some type of social worker, volunteer social worker, would pick kids up in a van, take them, and then whether it's basketball, whether it's touch rugby, whether it's football, like just get them out active and just it's something positive. But yeah, and it's easy for me to say, but it's hard to put into place. But that's where you have volunteers out there who or sports, cultural groups, whatever, and it's fantastic. And I've been a volunteer, and so I take my hats off to them because they give up their own time, and it's for the betterment of the future.
It's hard to imagine a more like draining arm of the police to be in than dealing with the kid stuff.
Yeah, and if I use child homicides, baby homicides, it's really difficult. And a lot of our staff we work on there will have young children. So I've got to be as a leader and boss, I've got to be mindful of that. And it's a couple of years ago I was asked to facilitate called a management of serious crime course at police college for 2 weeks, which was for detective senior sergeants and senior detective sergeants. And the course theme was child homicide because I've run so many and I have a lot of contacts within the child abuse world. Headquarters detective inspector and I ran the course, and it was tough. You could see on those participants it was tough. But the police are so good now compared to say when I started. The wellness, the welfare, the psychological counselling, psychologists available. Some of those squads, child protection, child exploitation, child sex offender management, they are mandatory, have to go for psychological counselling a couple times a year.
Yeah. The changes in that time must have been seismic. Like when you started, I suppose you couldn't sort of show any sort of weakness or vulnerability at all. People would tell you to harden their fuck up.
Yeah, basically, it was take a concrete pill.
You're a pussy if you.
But it was it was just a little bit the way it was, the culture of it at that time. But like I look back at some of my DIs that I had as bosses, and what they said went, but they were nice, good guys, and you learned a lot. And look, as a boss, I've got my good points, I've got my bad points, and people can learn from me. And I really enjoy now passing on my skills, knowledge, experience to the staff. Like I've been in Wellington this week, presenting the course, and I've got to that age where like, what can I do to help the staff grow and be better detectives, better police officers?
What are the biggest sort of leadership lessons you've got over the years?
I think communication with the staff is important. Like, there were some bosses I had who it was just bang, 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 you do this. There's no consultation, no. And I think communication is really key and important for our staff, particularly the younger generation. And consultation. And I remember a couple of years ago, a homicide we were working on, and we're going places. And so during the night, my mind raced, right, we should be doing this. So I had a meeting with the NCOs before we had a big team meeting. And I said, right, this is what I want, blah, 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 blah. And one of my detective sergeants said, I thought, what if we did this and did it that way? And I thought, actually, that's better than my thought. And, he's operational. He's on the street. I basically sit up in the office and stuff like that. And I thought, no, you're right. And so I was quite prepared to change my view on what we're going to do because, let's listen to my staff. And I think that's important for staff and as leaders. We've got to listen to our staff because they're the ones out on the street. It's different on the street now than what it was when I was on the street. And I can have my views, and I've got my, I've been there, done that for a lot of things, but it's different now. And so talking to the staff, it's that communication, that interacting, and you're not there as the boss, bang, bang, bang. Like
you do as I say because I'm your senior.
It's how's things going? What's happening at home? And like for me with my football, there's a number of staff who support various English football teams, and so we have a good banter. And I think that's really good for them that they haven't come to work on the boss. I know some staff say, well, I don't want to speak to the boss, but the staff that know me come to fine.
And have you always been like quite a compassionate and caring guy, or is this something that you've sort of developed over the years after dealing with so much sort of misery and grief?
Well, I think early on in my CIB career, as I say, there were some cases, and you work on them, and they were quite big cases. The Rexbell homicide in Northcote Motel in 1988, and then in '89 had the Swedish inquiry, Operation Stockholm. And just dealing, particularly Operation Stockholm, I was involved with Swedish families when they came out. There was Heidi Park and Urban Auckland, at that time it hadn't been found. And, you know, you feel for them. And I think then I started working in child abuse, and these young children who are being groomed, abused, and what can you do? And I remember there was one young girl, and it was a gang member, sexually abused her, and in the end, he sort of made partial admissions when I interviewed him. But back in those days, Corocare, in New Zealand, had Corocare, and they used to fly a plane load of children over to Disneyland. And I managed to get this young girl, she's 9 years old, to on the flight to go to Disneyland. And I think, yeah, if we can do something for our children, they've been through grief. You know, my partner, Gloria Masters, she's a survivor, but she's just written a book, Keeping Kids Safe, and it's just gone out to every school in New Zealand. And, you know, that's about looking after the adult survivors of child sexual abuse, because the triggering things that trigger them in life, and just carry on and on and on. And whether they've been to the police, whether the person's been charged, convicted, whatever, you know, they have to live their whole life knowing what happened to them. And it's so abusive and, yeah, intrusive. So I do a lot. I'm quite happy to support her. She runs a charity called Handing the Shame Back. It's all about supporting adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And I know I've been asked by them if I'd help promote a global hand sign for children under 16, which is a simple, because children can't talk in certain situations. They don't know how to verbalise, or they're very scared, or not going to be believed. And so how do teachers, parents, and family friends pick up if they're not saying anything? But if they use a hand signal, and it has been used, and it has saved some. So, yeah, I say, because my career has a lot in young child sexual abuse, I'm keen to work in that area, yeah, even voluntarily, just to help out, so that as a society, as a country, we can do something better.
You mentioned a couple of high-profile cases there from earlier in your career. So let's go back and we'll run through some of these. So you graduate in 1980 as a 19-year-old, and then so all you know at that point is Palmerston North. Yes. And then you get sent to Auckland for some reason. Paint a picture of Auckland in 1980. So you live in like some sort of police barracks, right, at the police station?
Yes. So that's some good homework. No, so you get, when you join the police, I was asked, you know, what's your four mains? Where would you want to go? You know, rank 4 places. So I want to go to a big city. So Wellington was close to Palmerston North, so I put Wellington. I thought, I like Napier, Hawke's Bay, Napier, New Plymouth, and I'll put Palmerston North last. And they sent me to Auckland. So, hello. We used to have to live in barracks in Vincent Street, right next to the Central Police Station. And that was a 100-metre walk to work. But there was an intercom in your room, so they could get you anytime they wanted. And I'd been to Auckland once for a football tournament, and stayed on the shore, and the tournament was at Avondale College. And so I didn't know Auckland at all. And I remember my first couple of weeks, I was walking beat in Queen Street. And someone comes up to me, and you expect it to be a walking encyclopedia. And someone came up to me and said, "Oh, where's the Canterbury Building Society?" I looked and said, "Christchurch." Well, it was across the road and about 50 metres down. So you soon learn. But that's what I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't know Auckland at all. And, you know, back then you had the Boot Boys, the skinheads, you had some of the bars.
Boot Boys, what are they? It's like a gang.
Yeah, the skinhead, the Boot Boys. Yeah,
okay.
Back then there was
And was that when the King Cobras were the Ponsonby gang? Or
they were, yes, no, they were starting out, yeah, definitely, out there. The headhunters were around. And
what were your big crimes then?
Oh, well, bank robberies.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when I first joined the CIV, bank robberies were huge. Yeah, all the time. And, they'd go into a bank, jump up on the counter, fire a shot through the ceiling and take the money and run. And we did a lot of work around those. To be fair, fraud, like when I first joined the CIB, I was actually came as a uniform attachment, and the weekend before I started, I broke my thumb playing football, got a ball kicked into it. So they put me on fraud squad. And of course, it was check series back then. So you had the
Oh,
checks.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
The bounce
It's a long time ago. It's a long time
Yeah,
ago.
I remember.
Checks are bounced and stuff like that. And yeah, sort of credit cards were just starting to come in, play, and it was different fraud where you look at it now and look at the online scams, look at the telephone scams, all that stuff.
Mm. Yeah, you reflect on that now. It's a simpler time, eh? Like, I remember going to the fish and chip store and there'd be like a wall of dishonoured checks hanging up there, and bless. And I've heard you make what I think is a joke. So the police barracks where you were staying, they had 3 rules: like no women, no alcohol, no drugs.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say in another interview you obeyed one of the rules.
Well, I think, yeah, never had drugs. No, sorry, just, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. Can you remember your first arrest?
Funny you should say that, because I was thinking I'm coming on here. And it was, in those days, we could arrest people for being drunk in a public place. And it was a female in her 20s, and she was paralytic drunk. So we arrested her for being drunk. She pleaded not guilty, because sometimes they can plead guilty and pay a fine and go back then. Didn't not guilty, went to court, and I had to go to court. And the judge said to me, when I was giving evidence, could you understand her? And I said, yes. Well, he said she wasn't drunk then and acquitted her. And I thought to myself, I should have said yes, because I've been drunk and I know how to slur my words, so I could understand. But anyway, but that was back then. We don't do that now.
Yeah, yeah. When you started, how long did you see this career lasting? Did you imagine it would be your entire working life?
Well, I think back then, it was one vocation in life, sort of thing. But I didn't know. I didn't know where it was going to take me. I enjoyed. I was brand new in Auckland. I didn't really know anyone until a couple of guys who were on my wing, and you get to know people, start playing sport, get to meet more people. Met with wife, and married, had children, and you start to grow. And then, of course, I've been in the job 6 years, and some of my mates had started joining the CIB, Criminal Investigation Branch. How is it? Oh, it's good. It's really good. A lot of study. It was a bit of pressure. And I thought, I'd been to the Springbok tour, I'd been through Queen Street riot. I just thought, time. Murder was the #1 crime in New Zealand, and if you want to be an investigator, that's what you want to investigate. And so I joined the CIB in 1986.
Just backing up a bit, you mentioned the Springbok tour, 1981. Yeah. What was your involvement in that?
So, I wasn't on the Red Squad, but basically, particularly once the Waikato-Hamilton game was abandoned, it was really ramped up. So I remember flying in a Hercules down to New Plymouth for the next game. Then we flew to Wanganui. And in fact, we'd flown to Wanganui. We got down there, intelligence was there was going to be a big protest in Kaipa Pass in Auckland. So that we had lunch and we flew back. We didn't even go to police the game. And then, you would, obviously every basically Wednesday and Saturday when there were games, there were protests. And so you'd have to police those. And just looking after Eden Park at times, security there.
For a young man, so 20 years old, 21 years old at that point, a relatively new cop, is that exciting and exhilarating?
Yes and no. It was the unknown. You hadn't been through this before, and the training was different. We certainly didn't have the protective gear that the police have to have now, but it was also quite sad. I remember one time there was a protest and it was marching down Simon Street, and we had to get on a bus and line up as the protests walked past, and they'd be yelling at you and have microphones. And I remember standing next to one of the Maori police officer, and he got abused. That's not fair. They seemed to target him, and I didn't like that. And then, but we had to they'd walk past, the protest would walk past. We'd have to get back on the bus, drive further down the street, get out, and go through it all again because we didn't have enough staff. And that's how we had to police it. And so it was interesting. And I know people have their views, and I don't sort of get into politics around that. My only thoughts is that police staff had to be there. We didn't have a choice. That was our job to be there, whether we supported or not. We had to be there. And sort of the worst thing for me was one of the guys I knew who'd been on the Red Squad ultimately later committed suicide because he'd been severely injured. And
What was the Red Squad? So like the
Red
AOE?
Squad was, well, no, they were a squad formed, trained, and they travelled around with the Springboks at their hotel, and they did and they were the ones who went on, Waikato, went onto the field, highly trained. Really good guys. Yeah, I knew quite a lot of them,
In terms of like mental health and suicide within police, is it much of an issue? Like the things that you guys do and experience, it's not normal.
Well, I know of three staff who have committed suicide, but way back. The police now, as I said before, have really moved on, and in terms of their wellness and welfare for the staff, it's a priority. And as a leader, it has been my priority. I have to look and, do I notice something going on here? And if I do, hang on, you need to take a few days off. And the availability of going to a psychologist, which I've probably said before, I've been to a psychologist, but it's a bit like, I said the analogy is you have a car, you get a warrant for the car. Well, going to a psychologist means like getting a warrant. Just making sure that you are functioning and going to last.
Yeah. 100%. What was it? When did you first see a therapist? How old were you?
No, it was, in fact, for me, it wasn't. No, it's during the around 2011 or 12, because some of the squads we had, our child protection, they would then had to go to see the psychologist, and so I would go, while I wasn't down in the weeds doing the day-to-day investigative work, because I had my staff there, I had to deal with it. I would go so I could get a picture of what's going on with my staff if I needed to, but also so we've got to watch this with the staff, and I've got to watch this for myself, type thing. But after Grace Millane case, I went and saw a psychologist and just to get it's like a Warren Fitness, get a check-up.
Yeah. I feel like in some areas there still is like a stigma about it, or it seemed to be weak, but it's definitely not. It's wonderful. It's like a personal trainer for your head.
It is.
It's brilliant.
And I have children, I have grandchildren. I want to be good for them. I want to be happy and playing and all that. I'm not trying to say fit.
As I mentioned earlier, like I can't reiterate this. I think you're in great nick for a man that's almost at retirement age. Actually, for any age.
Yeah. Well, I've always believed that physically fit, mentally fit, and because I've played sports, I've run. I used to run half marathons and stuff like that, and age is catching up on me, and some of the old football injuries is catching up, so I can't run as much as I'd like to. But you just change what I do. So I have a little routine now where, I'll do press ups, sit ups, weights, and then go for a basically K run, then do my sit ups, weights, and do that again. Then do 5 minutes on the X cycle, then do my sit ups, press ups, weights, and stuff. Then go for another run. So I've changed what my fitness, but I still do that. I try and do that 2 to 3 times a week.
Because I've heard stories about you from previous colleagues that even though you didn't have to do this, you still put your hand up to do the police fitness test, like well into your 50s, like dragging a trailer around and like climbing up over a fence.
Did it last year.
Did you? Why? Yeah. You're a desk jockey now, aren't you?
Yeah, but I just, it's sometimes that's about leadership. Hey, start. Probably for me personally, I'm not letting them think I can't do it.
Right, there you go.
But I think for the staff, I'll go out and do it.
Yeah.
And like, I think at 50 you can touch the wall, but last year I went over the wall. I struggled to get over it, but I got over it. Someone took a photo of me going over it. But I just, and that's just a personal challenge. Can I stay fit enough to keep doing the PCT and the full PCT going over the wall?
Well, that's wonderful. I, as a guy that's 52 now, I find that inspiring. I hope to be the same when I'm 64 as well. So we talked about the Springbok riots in 81, and you mentioned also the Queen Street riots in 84. I had Andrew Fagan on the podcast last year, who was the lead singer of a band called the Mockers.
Yes.
So Queen Street riot, it was like an end of school year concert thing, pre-concert at AOT Square.
December 1984.
Yeah, and Andrew Fagan and his band, the Mockers, were playing in the afternoon. I asked him his recollections of it, and he said, there were some bottles being thrown at him, but then afterwards he just walked back to his boat in West Haven, and of course no internet, no cell phones, no technology. So he slept blissfully unaware of what was going on in his boat, and the next day, managed to get to a landline and call his manager, and his manager was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Yes. What are your recollections of that time?
Okay,
what caused it, by the way? Was it herbs in the afternoon? And,
No. So what happened was there was people who'd got up on the Bledisloe Lane at the post office, as it was then, up on the veranda and started urinating. So police got up to put them down, and they got abuse, and it started there. And like that night, because I was working at Avondale full time there myself, and I had a permanent partner in the incident car. But it was a Friday night, and that week our shift was 7 at night to 3 in the morning. But we used to have to come into the city to get a car for the night. And we had an inquiry, this is funny, we had an inquiry section at Avondale, and they had this brand new, spanking new Ford Falcon. It was their pride and joy. Probably hadn't even done 100 Ks. It was so new. And we needed a car just to come to the station, get our car to go back. So that's what we did, took that. On the way, and this is about 6:30 at night, on the way, can you go to ATS Square? There's disorder, it's out of hand. Okay, where do you want us to park? Just park out where the picture theatres are in Queen Street there. So that's where we parked, this brand new spanking Falcon. And at that time, because we had our PR24, which had come out the longer pattern, which had come out during the Springbok tour, but we had no headgear. We just had a short sleeve t-shirt, and you get out there, and next thing this riot is developing, and it's getting worse, and ultimately we ended up doing bat charges down Queen Street, but we had nothing, and the bottles are flying. I think there's something like 56 police officers taken to hospital that night. And I remember at one stage we were doing a bat charge down Queen Street, and you just go 20 metres, instead of stopping, the boss wanted to come back 10 metres, which as soon as you came back, they'd blast on you. But you'd be doing a bat charge, and the person, I remember one time when the person beside me just screamed and dropped. And because all we had was our uniform, we didn't have protective gear. And I think I finished about 3 o'clock the next morning, and my partner was covered in blood. It was
like a war zone.
It was horrendous. It was a riot, and I remember one time you'd heard that because we'd force them back down Queen Street, and then you start to hear the glass going, and they were just smashing every shop window there was, and then you start to see the looting starting. It was just out of control, and and the worst thing was that brand new Ford Falcon had every panel smashed. It was on this roof, and those inquiry staff, because they're older policemen, just gave me grief. I still see one of them, and he still gives me grief. So,
it was like your fault.
Yeah, because we took their car, and because we're going to pick up our car we have for the night and take their car back. That didn't happen.
So I think Dave Dobbin faced some charges, didn't he? Because I think his band DD Smash was on stage at the time. Do you like DD Smash or Dave Dobbin?
I do like the music. I'm not impressed because I had friends who were, because there was only policed by a sergeant who I knew, I actually played football with, and 5 staff. And of course, it's a full ATS Square, and they turn on them, and it was pretty tough. And they were just trying to do their job. But I do listen to that music.
Is it triggering?
At times, yep. And in fact, when I hear the name, Queen Street, right, it's automatically where I go to.
Yeah, and the funny thing, just bringing up the differences between like then and now in terms of policing, like a big part of the Grace Millane case, and we'll get into that, centred around the incredible CCTV footage.
Yes.
High definition footage everywhere. Back then in '84, none of those looters would have been caught, right? Because there was not a camera anywhere.
No. No cameras then.
And another one you mentioned before, Operation Stockholm, the Swedish tourists.
Yes.
So what was your involvement with that? That was down Coromandel Way, right?
So what happened was I was working a duty weekend, and it was this Saturday or Sunday it might have been, and the Swedish couple were missing, not that we knew, because it had last been in Thames, and they'd had a car, and the car was found in Watling Street in Mount Eden. And so the DI, John Hughes at the time, got a group of us together because we were working, and he just basically said, right, you and you, you'll be on this quarry, and you'll be on till the end. And he pointed to me, you'll be on to the end. And it started from there. And so we started doing general inquiries, trying background and stuff. And then, because I had a couple of young children at the time, so staff who didn't went down based in Thames. I was based in Auckland. And yeah, we went for a few months, and then David Tamahiri's name came up.
Mm.
And we'd had a code that if the detective senior sergeant rang us and said the copy's boiling, we were onto it, definitely onto it. And I don't know, it's Wednesday night, something like that in the week, and it's about 7 o'clock, and I get a phone call from the D senior, the copy's boiling.
Mm.
Whoa. Yeah, because we've been full time on the inquiry. And so I went out, I had to get a search warrant for the address where his family lived in Avondale, and then we found property belonged to a Swedish couple, and it went from there. And then the next morning, I think I finished about 2 o'clock in the morning, had to be back at work for 8 o'clock briefing, and they had a team to go up to Mount Eden where David Tamahiri was, and I was included in that team, part of the interview team, and it started from there. And of course, that day, he admitted to stealing the car, but that was all. And yeah, it just went from there. And then one of my tasks was to do background into him, all his criminal offending, all the cases and stuff like that, which I did.
Mm.
And yeah, we interviewed him a number of times when he got charged. And trial, and you know, it was a circumstantial case. You know, nobody's been found, no scene. It was circumstantial, and yeah, he got convicted.
Mm. When you're interviewing someone like that, yeah, what's it like? Michelle Obama's got this quote that I've used in the podcast heaps. I'll probably botch it up, but it's something like most people are hard to dislike up close. But I feel like there's probably exceptions to that rule. And I've had an old mate who was on the podcast, Chuck Henwood.
Oh yeah.
And, we talked to him about who was Malcolm Rawa?
Oh, Malcolm Rawa.
Yeah.
Joe Thompson. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Malcolm Rawa. He said dead in the eyes. Yeah, impossible to like up close or far away.
Yeah.
When you're with someone like Tamahiri, who's been convicted and at that point was accused of like murdering these backpackers, yeah, what's it like?
Look, he was an intelligent enough guy. He could talk. Not quite willing to talk about a whole lot of things. Obviously, he could talk about the bush because he'd grown up in Commonwealth. But yeah, he wasn't. I've dealt with people before who we left in a room with them where I never got that feeling. That hearing. Yes, I totally believe, and I know it's been through appeals, and just in last year the Court of Appeal still found him guilty, and I've always believed that he was guilty. My knowledge of all the files where he was involved in, and my dealings with him, and people won't convince me otherwise.
Mm. Yeah, a mate of mine put out a podcast last year. This guy Ryan Wolf put out a podcast called Gibbs, which revisits that. When do things like that, like do you listen to it? Does it bother you? Does it piss you off? Are you indifferent about it?
I have listened to it, and I've spoken to Ryan, and there's certain things in there I go, oh no, that's not quite right.
Mm.
But there's other things, oh, that's interesting. But then, from the investigation, I was based in Auckland. Yes, once a week we had to go down to Thames for a briefing to catch up with everything. So I wasn't involved in a lot of the stuff that went on down in Thames and the daily briefings. But we had so much work in Auckland to do. Yeah.
And another thing in your amazing career, the 1990 Commonwealth Games, were you involved with protecting the Queen?
Oh, yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so
I'd been on as a brand new team, basically called Witness Protection, that's VIP squad, and we're down to personal protection officer training. Did that, and that included driving, firing. This, then when the Commonwealth Games were on, and Prince Andrew came first, and I was a security car driver behind their car. So I'd have British personal protection officers in the car. And we went round, and then on the final closing ceremony, because by then the Queen had come across, and so I was driver behind the Queen's car. So I've done a lap of Mount Smart. Right. driving where we drove around.
It's so badass.
Yeah,
It's cool.
I know. Driving, not running.
There's some good memories, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The job is fantastic. And I'd say to people, everything is what you make of it. Within the police, there are so many different fields, whether you want to be a dog handler, if you want to work on search and rescue, if you want to work on Eagle, like even going to work in rural, like I've worked in Kaikoai. It's totally different work in the big city. So I know both aspects. There's different, you can work in the school, community officer roles, all that sort of stuff, youth aid. There's a whole vast range, and everything's what you make of it, and make sure you're happy. And that's my job, make sure the staff are happy, because if they're not happy, they're not going to do a good job.
Yeah, most of the career has been in Auckland, but there's been stints in Kaikoai and Hawke's Bay. They eventually got you to Hawke's Bay.
I got there, yeah.
How long were those stints for, and what were you doing?
Kaikoai, I went up there because I had some in-laws who lived Kaitaia North. I had a very close friend who lived Kerikeri, and I just wanted something different. I just wanted to experience something totally different, and believe me, it was. They called me the tar seal detective when I got up there, because a lot of the 80% of the roads in Northland, on the far north, were not tar seal. They're just dirt tracks up. But it was a different world, and I try and explain even to some of my staff now that I remember going out and called to a homicide at the back of Opanoni. There was the single man car. There was myself as a detective. It was a 45-minute drive. You go there, you could see the person in this house, and the informant had been a convicted murderer. You go there, you see the person, and he's obviously dead in the house, and there's bloody red, he's been murdered. But a double-story house, and I thought, gosh, say someone else is in the house, I need to check. Step-in plates that you see at crime scenes now hadn't got to Northland. We'd had them in Auckland, not here, but we didn't have them in Northland. So I have to rip pages out of my head and to crime, so I didn't, in case I contaminated the scene. There was none there. We get back. We then had to drive 5 kilometres to get communications. So we were out of comms where we were. And then you have to wait 3.5 hours for the DI and staff to arrive from Whangarei. That doesn't happen in the big cities. So I know what it's like in rural, small town New Zealand.
Did that feel like, is it a small town sort of job? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
A slower pace of life for a cop? Police officer?
It wasn't a slower pace of life. It was horrendously busy. I don't think I've ever been so busy in my life.
Wow. The
serious crime was just, blows you away. But of course, they didn't have social media. You didn't have mainstream media up there. And so stuff that we worked on would be front page news under the radar. But you had to work on it. And, if you had to go to have a high court trial, that was in Whangarei. So you could have a case in, say, Opanoni, which is 45 minutes away from Kaikoai, and the trial would be in Whangarei, and you've got to get your witnesses there. So you start really early and get them. It's a totally different world.
And then in Hawke's Bay, what was going on down there? Was it a lot of gang activity?
Yeah. I first, one of the reasons why I went down, got out of Kaikoai was, we'd come back to Auckland for holidays, and the traffic, and of course there's no traffic lights in Kaikoai at the time. I thought, I'm not going back to Auckland. And then we lived on a farm. We moved into the farm, got sold, moved into a police house, and everybody knew where the detective lived. And then my oldest son got beaten up at school because his dad was a detective. And I thought, that's not fair. And I've got to, yes, it's an adventure for the kids, but I've got to also look after them. And so I thought, we'd always liked Hawke's Bay. So I was trying to get a promotion as a sergeant down there. But a detective job came up in Napier. So applied, got that, went down there, and within about 4 or 5 months, I got a sergeant's job at Hastings, which was a real eye-opener because I didn't know my way around. And, had the staff. But that's also, going back to uniform sergeant, was leadership and management 101. So,
Yeah, one thing that amazes me is like how much you've done. So there's the career side of things, but also your dad of 4, 3 sons and a daughter.
Yep.
And a granddad now. We'll get to that chapter of your life later. But also, like a mate of mine, Brad, messaged me and he said you coached his football team for a while and you were president of the club. first of all, the extracurricular stuff blows my mind. And I suppose it's an essential thing to have that sort of balance, but I don't know how you prioritize and fit it in. But also the family stuff. Like, were there a lot of sacrifices made? Like things that you missed because you had to drop everything in order to get back to a crisis at work?
Absolutely. It was, and probably a really good example is we moved to Kaikoai and we lived out on a farm in Kaihau. It was during the school holidays. I had 4 children. My daughter was only 6 months old. And within, I think it's a week, I've been starting working up there. It was school holidays. And because we lived on a farm, so nearest neighbour was about 200 metres away. And, my then wife didn't know anyone around. And there was a homicide in Whangarei, which I got sent to. And I was out of town for 10 days. So she's left by herself with the children. And that's where those small communities, the wives and partners, really get together and support each other, which is really good. So, I just think that there was times where, I did miss birthdays, which was sad. But they understood, and we taught, and my kids are fantastic. They're grown up now, they're adults. I know they're proud of me, but I am so proud of them and what they've achieved and what they've done. And it's just, and they're my world. I just, the grandkids, it's, and that's, and because when your children start to grow up and they start playing sport, and so I was involved with coaching, which was really great. As I said, I had 3 boys and a girl. I said to my boys, once you reach teenage years, I'm going to stop coaching you because I don't want to lose the relationship, the father-son relationship. I'll give you advice, but I'm not going to be coaching you. And of course, my oldest boy at high school, first year at high school, played football, and then said, I'm going to play rugby. What? And that was, but good on him. He ended up playing league. He ended up being vice captain of the Orewa College first 15. It didn't matter as long as they're involved with sports. My daughter, gymnastics, netball, football. Some of the sons did surf lifesaving. All the kids did surf lifesaving, athletics. Anything to keep them occupied, and I just got involved as a volunteer. Just got involved coaching, managing, helping out, then of course the football club, High Coast. In '96, we came back to Auckland and just started coaching. One of mate of mine in the police said, "Oh, you should get on the junior committee," which I did. And then, just through the coaching, I ultimately did the international team coaches license back then through New Zealand football. And I wasn't competent yet at the end, so I didn't gain that, but I had my national license. But I worked with New Zealand football, coaching in their academies, and I'd take week off work to run school holiday programs up in West Coast, and and then just giving back. And then I liked coaching the little ones, sort of 7, 8 years old, but I also liked coaching the 17-year-olds, the teenagers, and because you can have a really good influence, a good role model. And I know police throughout the country who are involved in sports clubs, and I've got some friends who've done it, and I think it's in the police DNA to be community orientated, to be community minded, and get out there and help in the community. And I see it, and like for me, the big honour really is that there's probably nearly a dozen players I've coached, both boys and girls, who've joined New Zealand Police. And I think, well, if I was a good role model for them, and that's what they've done. And I know there's other police out there around the country who do the same thing, and I'm sure there's other kids because of them who join the police.
God, you've been so generous, eh? It'd be easy to go, listen, I'm tired. I've got a family and my job, and that's enough. Brad, who I mentioned, a friend of mine, he wanted me to ask you about some FBI training. He said you've got some great yarns about that. Did you? Yeah. What was FBI training? So,
like I've been fortunate in New Zealand Police. Some of the leadership courses I've been on, like back in 2006. I went to Canberra for a month on what's called a management of serious crime course, which is almost a South Pacific type course, but run by AFP in Canberra. And there you get a lot of media training. Like we had almost a week of media training, which was good. It starts to prepare you. And I'd already done some media. I was a detective senior sergeant then. And then in 2007, I went back to Canberra for a human trafficking for sexual exploitation course, a 3-week course, which is around human trafficking, forced labour, sexual servitude. And then I was really lucky in 2010, I was off the chance to go to Quantico, the FBI Academy over in the States. Basically, it was a 3-month, 2.5-month course, which was like a university semester. So you had to do 7 subjects. And I remember at the time, I was booked to go in January 2010. In the December, my mother she'd had cancer 14 years earlier, but had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I remember between the Christmas and New Year, I'd taken her down to the oncologist, and she got to the toilet, and I just said to him, so next week I'm off to the States for 3 months. And he just looked at me, he shook his head. And, so I had to ring up, and they changed it to July, and my mother passed away in February. So we, went across to Quantico. The 7 subjects you had to do. Fitness and law enforcement was compulsory. The international students, because there's 272 people on the course, and 30 of us were from all around the world. So there was one from New Zealand, and the New Zealand police was at that time sending one staff member every 2 years. So I was really lucky and fortunate to go. There's a couple from Australia, but just Europe, all around the world. And I'm still Facebook friends with most of them, and it's great. But the course, so fitness and law enforcement, an international law paper. I did public speaking. I did police and the media. Did strategies for dealing with violent crime, managing death investigations, and the last one was the psychological profile of street and prison gangs. So it was like being at university for a whole semester, because we had sort of small tests and presentations to do on it. And but it was fantastic. But what I saw was, like, my roommate, he had shot and killed someone in the line of duty. There was a guy across the room from me who had shot and killed a guy in the line of duty, but at the same time he had been shot, and you can see here their facial reconstruction. But that was the norm for them. That was life for them. And dare I say it, we're starting to see that a little bit now in New Zealand police. But it was different, like, because in the FBI Academy, and they're from all the different law enforcement agencies across the states, the police department, immigration type, drug and alcohol, tobacco. And they were allowed to have their firearms. Well, they felt naked. I remember one time we went to a Walmart, and they just couldn't believe they were going without their firearms. What? So what? But not to them.
Yeah. What do you think? Should New Zealand police be armed?
Look, I have views, and it's easy for me because I sit up in the office. I'm not on the street daily, and if I look at, say, small town rural New Zealand, where's your backup? And maybe they should. In the bigger cities, there's a lot more backup. It's getting to a stage. Ultimately, a decision will be made. Now, I sort of swing both ways. I sort of think in the big city, maybe not. Some of the things that were put in place seem to be doing well. They won't be perfect. But once again, I'm not on the street. I'm not the one facing. I read our occurrences every day, and there's always firearms being found. You've just seen in the media, one of our team this week found a 3D firearm maker, and all these guns, and there's a photo in the Herald, and they look real, and they do operate like real firearms. And that's a real concern, the amount of firearms out there. And the safety for our staff is huge.
So all this training you had, the FBI staff and the media training in Canberra, I suppose, and all the experiences you had as a police officer pre-Grace Millane, I suppose it all sort of culminated?
Accumulated, yep. And
to being the right man at the right time.
To be fair, I had, as a detective in Kaikoura, I'd done media. As a detective sergeant in Orewa, I'd had to do media. So it wasn't new. And including, like, I was the 2IC as a detective sergeant of the Joan McCarthy homicide in Whangaparo in 1998. And, that trial went for 6.5 weeks. And there's a lot, and as the 2IC, you've got to organise, coordinate, put the file together. Yes, you have a witness team, and you have a file manager, but everything falls on you to make sure everything works. And so there's a lot of pressure and stress on that. And so, but my boss let me do some media around that, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to get some of my staff to do more media. Some of them are really nervous and don't want to, but
it gets easy. Anything gets easier the more you do, eh?
Correct. And so I had already done different media aspects, and even leading up to before Grace Millane, I'd done some cold case series, different TV shows, different media for different homicides at different times. So you the more you do, the more confident you get. You can never predict every question that comes, and you can't answer every question, unfortunately, because that's just the nature of the work we're doing. But yep, you get to Grace Millane, and it was interesting because while I wasn't involved in the media, with the Swedish inquiry, it was international, and the media, and I know there's a lot of media involved coming over, particularly around time of the arrest and court cases like that. And I sort of was aware of me. I wasn't involved in that aspect of it, obviously, as a detective, but I was very conscious of it. And there's some other cases that came up where international and media, and so as soon as that Grace Millane case came out, I just knew the media was going to be huge. And one of the things that happened was, and the family, and like a lot happened here in New Zealand now, had put her missing on a community Facebook page, and the Essex media had picked that up. So essentially, some of the British media knew before we even had the complaint that she was missing in New Zealand. And of course, it didn't take long once we had the complaint, started investigating, that our media, New Zealand media picked it up. And it was even on day one. And so it came in on the Wednesday afternoon. We just got some basic inquiries done, and I was getting updated up to about 10 o'clock that night. Then the next day we start with the investigation, get an investigation team start. And the media questions had already started coming. And so I ended up having 2 police media staff with me the whole time because it was so intense.
Yeah, so this all happens in your late 50s. You're 58, 59 years old. Prior to that, what would you have said was your career-defining moment?
Oh, I'd had a couple before that. Like the Swedish inquiry was huge, and the result and my involvement, because I had been part of the interview team with Tammy Harry. And so that was big for me. The Joanne McCarthy homicide was really big because Travis Burns was the offender, and it had gone on for 4 months before we got on to him as being, he is the offender. And there's a lot of pressure during the trial. And so I was basically 2 years on that, from the time of the investigation in the November 1998 right through to when the trial ended, tidy up everything. It's actually 2 years on that. And of course, a trial that big, and there's a lot of pressure. Like there's pressure because at that time, DNA and cross-contamination was an issue raised as defence. And I know the SR scientist was under a lot of pressure. And I was told at one stage that if we lose this case, we could lose the ESR from New Zealand, and police would have to send their exhibits across to Melbourne for testing. So there's a lot of pressure. Dare I say, Joe Karam sat in the back of the court at that time. You're dealing with a family, and this was hard, really hard for them. So that was a big case, and that, had a big impact. Because I was a detective sergeant. I was living up on the coast, and that's where it happened, up in Whangaparua.
Yeah.
So then 2014, in November 2014, the 1080 and the milk powder scare, Operation Concord, came on. And I sort of ran that from the November through to February, when, because of the blackmail implications on the government and pressure, a D-Super came in to run it. And I ended up being in charge of the suspect team. And we had, I think that's something like over 2,000 persons of interest. And we finally got down and got the offender. And he pleaded guilty in court, which was huge, because there's huge pressure. That's probably one of the most politically motivated, well, not motivated, but political investigations we've done, because we had to brief the Prime Minister daily
Was that Helen? At that point?
No, that was John Key.
John Key.
And yeah, because the implications, what we were told was, if Fonterra collapsed, then the New Zealand Commonwealth would collapse. And that's huge. Yeah. And so, yeah, there was a lot of pressure on that. And like every day I had to brief headquarters on everything that was going on. And that included Christmas Day, New Year's Day.
Do you want to pause for a drink of water?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, yeah. It's been such a career, eh? These stories are just the things that you've seen and done. It's remarkable. Yeah. How are you feeling? You going okay?
Yeah, no, good. I'm fine. Yeah.
I watched The Lie last night on Netflix.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I should have asked for royalties. No, sorry.
You've seen it. You're involved with that. Have you watched it, and how do you feel when you watch it?
Well, I watched it way back when it first. In fact, it was really interesting because obviously I was involved in the production of it, and the director from UK came over. And then last year I was in Europe, and I went over to London, and I actually stayed with Grace Millane for 3 nights just to keep up, which was really good for her because she could just talk to me about things she couldn't talk to family and friends because I knew everything that gone on.
Like about what sort of stuff? What sort of stuff would she chat about with you?
So Julie would chat to me about some of the personal stuff, around Grace, around the case, and some of the things that went on, which, because there was some stuff that was suppressed, and I could talk to her, and because she couldn't talk to her friends or family because they didn't know in the detail, but I could talk, and I think it was a very good outlet for her. I remember a couple of times we sat and would have breakfast, and then 3 hours later we're still talking. So that was good. But it was while I was over in the UK, and I had a friend in Aussie contact me and said, I've just been looking at Netflix. I see this girl, and the next thing I hear your effing voice. What the heck? I said, what? And he said, yeah. So then I contacted a friend in New Zealand and said, hey, this is The Lie. What? Oh, yeah, it's going to start on Netflix next week. So I actually caught up with the director over in London. She didn't even know. So, yeah, it wasn't until I got home. And then I watched that. Here we go. I watched it. So I thought it was done really well. And I thought the message behind it, in terms of the rough sex defence, was really, really good. And particularly at the very end, and you see all those names of all those women that have died as a result of rough sex.
Yeah. So I'm just stuck on Gillian Millane. Like, whenever I think of her, like it breaks my heart in a way. Like, first of all, what she's done, post losing Grace and David is remarkable. Like climbed Kilimanjaro, and she's done all this charitable stuff, the handbag charity and
Love Grace campaign handbags.
Yeah. I can't imagine, because people say time heals the wounds, but I don't know. I don't think that's the sort of grief that you could ever get over. And even though medically there's no way of knowing it, like there's her husband's cancer had to be caused by stress, right?
Absolutely. It was interesting because, I got on really well with David. It was interesting when we heard that he was flying over, and then we heard that he was a self-made billionaire, and he's bringing the media with him. I thought, oh my God, this is the last thing I need. So I'd said to my family liaison officer, when you pick him up, bring him from office. So he comes to the office, and we're just chatting away. And I said, look, one of the things I will do is I'll tell you everything before I talk to the media, because it's only fair that you hear first. He said, okay. I said, there's only one condition on that. I said, if you talk to the media out of turn, I'll have to be careful what I tell you. And I'll stop talking to you. Like that. And he looked at me, and I thought, oh gosh, no one's ever spoken to him like that before. But he was really good. He said, no, I'm not here. This is your job. That's your job. Blah, blah, blah. So I'd just gone from saying, I don't want you to speak to the media out of turn. And then I said, I want you to sit with me at the media conference this afternoon, which he did. And he got upset, and it was pretty tough.
Where were things at that point? She was just a missing person?
She was still a missing person. So she gets reported as a missing person. And this is one of the reasons why we go to the media. It wasn't a homicide. And I totally understand the family violence homicides, But usually we have that offender within 24 hours. And so you don't go to the media, but this is a missing person. And so we can go to the media. And because of the red flags right from the start, we had to go to the media.
Red flags as in a girl that was active on social media that suddenly wasn't.
Yeah. Here's Grace, been in contact with her family every day since she'd been overseas. And she'd been in Peru before she came to New Zealand. It was her birthday on the 2nd of December. And of course, she went out the night of the 1st December. She'd messaged a friend while she'd with Kempson. And then there's nothing. All communication stopped. On her birthday, her family can't get hold of her. She doesn't get hold of her family. Friends can't get hold of her. What's going on? So it was definitely red flag.
Yeah.
And so it came on the Wednesday. The Thursday we start. Then we actually, because he'd been on her Facebook page, last one to comment. And the Thursday afternoon, he comes in. Well, we found him. He came in and talked. And of course, he told a lie.
Not just one.
Yeah, no, well, he said he was working when he wasn't working. Did just everything. Everything he said, apart from his name, was a lie, basically.
Yeah. So when you meet David Millane, what do you say to him? Are you honest and you say, I've got to say, like, it's not looking good, or do you try and keep things positive? And
well, you have to, you have to be honest with him, because and like I said, look, we're hoping that maybe, there's some islands out here. Maybe she's met someone just gone to an island. I said, it's not likely, because your daughter, she hasn't been in contact on her birthday. So I said, that's why we've got a big investigation team, and we're doing everything we can to find her. So I said, there is a worst case scenario. And he said to me, Scott, I've been on a plane for 24 hours. I've thought of everything. Okay. So, I met him then. And of course, it's stressful for him, and we were his support. We had to wrap ourselves around and support. His brother came over the next day. But of course, it was on the Sunday when we found Grace, and then he flew home. And then, of course, we'd gone across to the UK for the funeral and that. So met him and saw him in his home environment and with his family. But I'd never known him prior to that. But from all accounts, a lovely guy. Yes, he's a boss, businessman. But then when they came for the trial, I just knew he wasn't right. And it's the stress. There's no doubt.
Oh, it's such a burden.
Of course. And, every day we're sitting during the trial, and they bring up the rough sex defence, and Gillian's sitting beside me. She's sobbing, shaking, crying. And the family had to listen to that, had to go through it. And yet we'd done all the prep we could. And I remember on the Sunday, they arrived on Saturday, trial's done on Monday. On the Sunday, I had them in office, and I was going through all the evidence. And of course, one of the things I had to show them was the CCTV showing Kempson and Grace going up in the lift, and then see Grace walk out. And that's the last time you see Grace alive. And of course, Gillian broke down. It was natural for her to cry. So it was really tough, and it's trying to be strong, but it does get emotional as well. And you then go through the trial, and every day having to listen, hear, and I just knew David, he just wasn't the same person I'd met the year before.
How could you be?
Yeah. And so, and then, basically as soon as they got back from the trial, which the verdict came out on the Friday, they flew back on the Saturday. He gets tested. He's found to have cancer. And at one stage, they thought it was coming right. And I spoke to him 3 weeks before he passed away.
And all your media stuff around this, yes, I've watched a heap of footage the last couple of days. There was the media briefing after the suitcase was found. After the verdict comes out, there's the Millanes and you standing on their shoulder just outside the court. How do you not break down?
It's tough. It is tough. Inside, on the exterior, I try to put on the brave, strong face, but inside, you're feeling for them. And as I've said in the media, I'm a family man. Got children around the same age, and what they've had to go through is horrendous. But that's the same with a whole lot of other homicide, families of homicide victims. And I've talked before about one day on a Christmas day having to take the photo of a homicide victim to the mortuary to identify their son on Christmas Day. yeah. It's just wrong, just so sad for them. And so for me, it doesn't matter what the background is, it's a loved one. And we've got to work with that partner. We've got to support, we've got to bring in victim support. And our victim support, particularly our homicide staff, are well trained, they do a fantastic job.
Did David have to identify the body, like a formal identification process, or was he sort of spared that?
No, we did that through dental rules.
But
you could tell it was Grace. Right?
Yeah.
We knew the circumstances as well.
So I had a podcast earlier this year with Mark Longley. I don't know if you've had any.
Oh, yeah, Mark. Yeah, yep.
And it's almost like the Millanes in reverse. He was in New Zealand, his daughter's in the UK. He had to fly over there. And one thing we talked about is, he was like 20, I think it was 2011 or 2012 when his daughter's murderer was incarcerated. And he was like, good, I don't have to think about this for at least 17 years. And he's sitting here now in 2025 with me. He's like, that date's coming up alarmingly quickly. And it's like another trauma that he has to deal with again.
Yep.
It's shit, eh?
It is. Shit. It is. And it was interesting. During the Grace Millane investigation, I had families of homicide victims of cases I'd run and been involved in who sent me flowers, sent letters, support.
Before Grace went missing, did you know anything of Jesse Kempson?
No.
Was he?
No, I didn't at all.
No. He was on the police radar, but just not your personal.
Yeah.
And someone who's articulate or well presented, like wearing a waistcoat, do you naturally treat them better or sort of presume innocence, even if it's a bias?
Well, at that stage, we didn't know. He just happened to be the last person to comment on her Facebook page. So we didn't know his involvement. And of course, the circumstances of us finding him was interesting, and that we'd established he'd lived at the City Life Hotel. We'd seen him in the morning, and he had agreed that after work, he would come to the police station after 4 o'clock and talk. And so, because it's at City Life Hotel, we just after the City Life to do some inquiries. And it was early afternoon, 1, 2 o'clock. And he walked past, and one of the concierge says, "Oh, there he is there." And of course, when he looked in and he sees the detectives there, and of course they're in their police, Saba, we call it, or BAS, which is the body armour. And he sees, as soon as he sees him, he turns his head away, turns around and walks back to Queen Street. Concierge says, "Oh, there he goes there." So they go, and staff had to run to catch him. They get round to Queen Street and he's gone. I can't find him. He'd gone down the steps of a shop and stood behind a display cabinet. So he couldn't be seen, but they found him. And he said, "Oh no, I was just in here looking for
another
line." And he came back. He came back to the station, and so that was, well, hang on, why would you do that? And then, of course, during that interview, he'd said, yes, we met at this Sky City, Andy's Burger Bar. Then we left. I crossed the road, went down to Victoria Street to Queen Street, ended up at a bar, parallel to Thurston, back home. And she just wandered off back to backpacks that I never saw again. And so that's what we had. And we had no other evidence to disprove that. And of course, CCTV is a huge component nowadays, particularly in the big cities. And so we had a team on that. And then one of the interesting things at the City Life Hotel, there were 14 cameras at City Life Hotel. There were 7 that we identified as key to what we needed to be looking at. But their system at the time was that you could only look at 1 camera at a time. So if you wanted to watch 8 hours, it was going to take 56 hours. And we...
You just don't have the time, do you?
Well, no. But then, I'm sorry, I had to say this after, you cannot fast forward because we could not afford to miss anything. So they had to watch it second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour. But when they picked up one of the cameras, and they actually, by that stage, during his interview, and he'd said, he didn't wake up till 9 or 10 in the morning, and they'd found CCTV of him going out at 8 o'clock in the morning. So when we went back with the investigator, you and said, or the detective put that to him and had the photo of him in the lift. "Is that you?" "Yep." "Is it in the lift?" "Yep." "This is 8:15. Oh, yeah, that's right. Before he said, "Just confirming you said you sort of didn't wake up till 9 or 10. Yeah, this is 8 o'clock in the morning. This is you. So, yeah, and from there it was, well, okay, now we're right onto it. We've got something here which to work on. So we did a search warrant, executed that night at his apartment. And of course, then it just rolled from there. We found the Friday night we did the luminol testing, and so Saturday morning when I come to work, there's a photo section did a great job. They had a photo booklet all ready for me. You know, they've been up all night, and yeah, you could see the luminol, and when you see all the blood around, you go, oh my gosh, what's happening here? But we knew we were onto it. And of course, David's here, and we were briefing him on the Friday afternoon. He'd been sat in the media conference with me. We'd done a media conference on the Saturday afternoon. It's just how it happened with, we'd had staff out at the Waitakeris by that time. Our technology experts had said his phone had been polling in the Waitakeris. So we had our staff out there. And then he, in his interview, the second time, because we brought him in on the Saturday, and one of the things I was doing, because I'd spoken to the Crown in the morning, I'd been at the scene, had a look at myself, spoke to the Crown in the morning, and we agreed circumstantially we had sufficient evidence to charge. So we're going to bring him back. And while he's been interviewed, and of course I don't monitor these interviews, I have other things. Sometimes I'm doing media conferences, sometimes other administrative stuff. But I had the head of search and rescue, and we were talking about the Waitakeris, because as we know, there's been other bodies found out there. And he just said, look, it's going to be somewhere where there's a lay-by or a car park, because you can't just park on Scenic Drive, as we know it's windy, it's narrow. So I'm thinking like this, and one side of the road there's houses, yes, there's bush and that, and covers the houses. On the other side it's just bush. So okay, so it's going to be the other side of the road. And then during the interview, the second interview, of course, rough sex defence, and so says everything, which I will say was self-serving. And he actually indicated where, described where, and we weren't far from that location, and we went there, and there was that grave. So and we just kicked in from there.
Yes, that was probably the most, I suppose, memorable, if that's the word, like media briefing that you did. So you went to site the body, and then you faced the media, and it seemed like you were like getting emotional towards the end. What's the time between you citing Grace Millane in a suitcase and then fronting the media?
So it was interesting that day because, as I say, the media intensity was huge. As I had 2 full-time media people with me, because there was just so many barrage of questions, media from UK, New Zealand, and of course within the media, the New Zealand bosses were saying to their staff, don't let the Brits get a scoop type scenario. The Brits were wanting to get a scoop. It was a frenzy within the media itself, let alone being from a police perspective. So I'd taken the pathologists out there, Scenic Drive around lunchtime, because we thought it was going to be early afternoon, and there's a lot of media. I had to close Scenic Drive for the safety of the staff because they're working right beside the road. So I put detours in, and of course the media down, so I put a barrier across so that the media could come up, so they could get shots in the distance, because I understand the media have a job to do. I've always tried to work with the media when it's appropriate. And then we sort of said, oh, look, we'll do a stand. I'll do a stand at 4 o'clock. So, and knowing that our New Zealand media have to prepare for the 6 o'clock news, the TV media, so it did editing and stuff like that. So it's 4 o'clock. Well, it took longer to get the suitcase out than we had anticipated. And of course, then the media would get a bit antsy. I was going, oh gosh. And, and then we get it out. We had an X-ray machine there. I had the pathologist there, unzip, and you can see, and didn't open it right up, but you can see this body. And there we just knew it was Grace. So they had to get a message to David Millane. And so you go from once sort of here with the staff and Grace, making sure we get a message to David Millane. My media person said, say this. So within 5 minutes, because we had got hold of David really quick, within 5 minutes, I was standing in front of the press. Now, it hadn't been a long investigation, it had only been 4 days, but we'd worked some long hours. And it had been emotional, because the case was getting sadder and sadder every day. And it's like, for me, being in the media, telling this crime novel that is getting sadder and sadder. And so everybody's listening, everybody's glued to it. And ultimately, the worst case scenario is there. And so within 5 minutes of there's Grace, David had been told, you stand in front of international media. And no prep, like, at all. You know, every time I'd gone out to do a media release for that, and I, with most media stuff, you know, sit with the media team half an hour before you go out to stand up. You do your presentation, they ask you questions, so you get in the zone and you go out. And I'd done that for the Grace's case, for the different media, except this one. There's no time to prep. And you have to go out, and it is sad because, you know, we have found it, which is, yeah, it is great on one hand because at least the family get to have Grace back. But, you know, we've now got this case, and because we're charged Kempton the night before the murder. And, yeah, it was tough holding back, and then I got the question, how are the family feeling? I just, how do you think the family feel? You know, I have a daughter, in her 20s, and it just came out. It wasn't planned, it wasn't prepared. It was just, yeah, and it just, yeah, it gets you.
You looked like you were on the cusp of crying at that point.
Yeah, I was having to hold it together.
Yeah,
yeah.
Just accumulation of long days and just the moment.
It was just tiredness. It was the stress. It was the build up. It was it was, you know, there's a truckload of media sitting there in front of you.
And and then when is it that you find out about the, you know, you said it gets grimmer and grimmer, and it got even grimmer still. Like when do you find out about the nude photos on his phone, Googling how to, you know, get rid of a body in the Waitakere, all the other unpleasant stuff that came afterwards?
So that comes in afterwards, you know, because obviously the investigation had only been going for 4 days. We can only do so much, some CCTV. But then getting into the technology world, getting into your phones and stuff like that was, you know, took a bit of time, but it came out. And of course, what he had done, you know, he goes on, he'd organised a Tinder date. He'd taken photos. He'd, you know, searched, Googled certain porn sites.
World's hottest fire.
Well, yeah, flesh-eating birds, Waitakere ranges, yeah, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, and then he actually goes out on a Tinder date on that Sunday, and Grace is lying dead in his room. You know, he obviously thought about it. He bought the suitcase.
And the times that you've had to be in his presence, are you in like disdain?
Yeah, well, I don't have to be. You know, like, it's important as a DI, sort of like they call them senior investigating officers now, that I sit up and I keep objective. You know, because I have to make decisions, be a decision maker. So you have to keep that objectivity. So it's no good me getting involved in an interview because I'll start losing my objectivity. So I didn't actually see that interview because on that Saturday, because actually I was doing a press release. Yeah, and when that interview was taking place. Not that I told the media that at the time, but yeah.
When you first, this comes, I guess, much later. When you first learn about the defence case, like, are you furious?
No, well, I have to say, okay, so this investigator, the rough sex defence was raised in his second interview. So I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have to deal with this. And that's part of the reason we go to the UK. We have to make those inquiries around rough sex. And yeah, I think it was important because it meant that when it came to trial, we weren't blindsided. You know, like Grace was 21, 22 years old. She's an adult. She can do what she likes. You know, that shouldn't impact on. It was just, you know, some of the lies Kempton said around the rough sex. I didn't know what it was. You know, something about, 50 Shades. Yet we had, through the investigation, because it went on for a number of months afterwards, we identified people who he'd had rough sex with consensually. So he knew what it was all about.
Yeah, one thing in the trial that struck out to me was just how, I think it was from one of the pathologists, like how long you have to apply pressure before someone passes out or you loses consciousness. So it's a very, very long time.
Yeah, it was a couple of them didn't range. One said 7 to 10 minutes, one said 5 to 10 minutes. But it was constant pressure so that you don't start and then stop, because when you start again, the clock starts again. So it has to be constant, serious pressure for 5 to 10 minutes. And you know,
come on,
you know,
common sense.
Really, 5 to 10 minutes. And he said that he was intoxicated and he'd gone to have a shower afterwards, and he thought she'd got up and left, he would have tripped over her going back and showered.
Do defence lawyers piss you off?
No, they've got a job to do. I understand that. I don't. I get on fine with the defence lawyers. You know, I don't. Yeah, it can be frustrating. It's difficult when you're sitting with the family, but that's their job. You know, everybody has a job to do, and that's part of the system. And I try and tell my staff, it's like sometimes sentencing, people go, oh, they can get a long enough sentence and stuff like that. Our job is to do a thorough investigation, a good investigation, put together a good prosecution case, to work with the Crown to put a prosecution case and trial to the jury. The outcome is up to the jury. Sentencing, yes, we get victim impact statements and stuff like that, but it's up to the judge. Now, if I try and tell the staff, if you're going to get focused and lose that, you must not work here, because you know you're worrying about something out of your control.
It's a great way of looking at it, and there's that saying that everyone is entitled to a fair trial, which they are, but it feels like Grace didn't necessarily get a fair trial in this case.
Well, that's the thing, and I have publicly said that, you know, the rough sex defence basically just re-victimised Grace, and she wasn't there to answer. And what I tell people is that there's no evidence that sex took place. Yeah, he says it, but we know he lies. You know, we have other people saying, "Oh, Grace wouldn't do that first time." You know, like that. You know, they'd have a safe word, but Grace wouldn't do that first time. And you know, and like some people, we had witnesses who said they had been back to, you know, Tinder dates back to Kempton apartment, and he flipped like Jekyll and Hyde. And one of them I managed to get out before anything happened.
Well, yeah, one of his former victims on that documentary, The Lie, she reckons that he would have flipped out after Grace turned him down, and that would have been the case. But we'll never know, will we?
We won't know unless he says.
Do you hear any like anecdotal feedback or stories about how he's coping in jail, and you get this feedback with a sense of glee, or you just have no interest in it?
Look, he's there. He got a minimum of 17 years non-parole, then it doesn't mean you get out after 17 years.
Yeah, can't.
I know Grace Millane won't say his name, you know, because she says, I'd rather use Grace's name. That's who I love. That's who I think of. That's who I miss.
So the trial for you, obviously you had some work to do there, but it seems like you were mainly there as sort of like a cheerleader or supporter for the family. How is it for you? Must be an awful experience.
But I've been through trials before.
Yeah.
I've done sort of that before. Yeah, I had to give evidence during the trial. So, you know, you've got to sort of get your head around it, what's going on in the trial, and also just making sure everything's gelling and working. But you've got staff to do that, and they did a fantastic job. Yeah.
And the wait for the verdict, how long was that?
Yeah, often people put, you know, like just amongst ourselves, just as a bit of black humour. Okay, how long? A day and a half, 2 days, 3 days, 4 hours. You know, like we just have a little bit. And I'd thought, they're going to come back on Saturday because it's the Friday, and of course they came back the Friday night.
Short turnaround usually means
we were
guilty?
obviously sometimes no, it could vary. Sometimes come back quick, not guilty. Yeah, but yeah, in this case, they went out just after lunch, and they were back by 5 o'clock. And sense of relief. The sense of relief. You know, that courtroom was packed. You know, every day of the trial, the courtroom was packed, and there's a large media contingent in there, and cameras are in there. And of course, when the verdict came out, you know, it's that sense of relief. Obviously, it was emotional for Gillian and David. You know, some of the public gallery were crying, some of the police staff in tears. Yeah, a lot of the reporters were young females, you know, in the media. And you can see they were upset. Some of the jury were crying. It was very emotional.
So while waiting for the verdict, are you with the Millanes, like sort of managing their expectations, saying, look, this could go either way? Because you don't know.
No, we don't know. And
I suppose you've been in situations before where, you know, the wrong verdict has come out.
Yeah, there's been cases where we haven't got the verdict we thought we should have got. And then you've got to deal with family. That's a different way of dealing with family. But that waiting is stressful, yeah, because you don't know what is the verdict. And, you know, you've got to support the family. And Yeah, I know we had 2 other sex trials coming up as a result of our investigation against Kempson. And one of the things Gillian did, which was fantastic, was at different times we brought the complainants into court just to make, because they carried this huge guilt that if they had reported, Grace would still be alive. And so we arranged to ask Gillian would she like to talk to them, meet them. And she did. And she said, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything. You know, like, he did it. He's the one who's accountable. He's the offender. Don't feel bad. And that was really good and reassuring for them. Yeah, and so for a mother in that situation, you know, Gillian's situation to do that just showed how lovely she is.
She's incredible, right?
Yeah.
The relationship you had with the parents was seemed like really close. Have there been other homicides like this, or was this one different for some reason?
Well, I think this one was different because they were, you know, Grace was from the UK. She wasn't from New Zealand. They don't have support and family here. And, you know, David had flown in for investigation. His brother arrived today, so later we looked after that there. And he was still here when we had the vigils. He was at the one in by Sky City. And then, you know, they come back for the trial, and once again, it's just the 2 of them. And family are all back home, friends, their support. So you have to support them. Yeah, I do, you know, speak to a lot of families and with the families in trials in New Zealand, and they're all New Zealand based, and you'll see there's a number of their whānau with them to support, and that's great. That's what they need. But I will always be there to talk, and they can talk to me and just.
So after that verdict, there's the media briefing outside where the Millanes are both sobbing, and you're in the background looking stoic like you do. What happens after that? Do you go out and grab something to eat? You just give them a ride back to their hotel? What happens?
So after the verdict, we went back. We just quickly debriefed. We then, because David then arranged to fly home the next day. So
nothing else to do.
No, well, why?
Yeah,
their family, they had their sons back home, you know.
Yeah.
So they need to go home, and so we went out for dinner. The Crown, the police staff, close police staff involved, and the Millanes at the hotel had dinner, and then the next morning, that Saturday morning, myself and the family liaison picked them up and took them to the airport, and it was quite sad because the airport had their flag at half mast, and
for that
it was
reason.
noticeable. And one thing that I will always thank, you know, Auckland Airport for was they allowed myself and the family liaison officer to walk the Millanes onto the plane. So we had all that security, and we could see them get in their seats and say goodbye. Yeah, I thought, wow, I couldn't believe we were allowed to do that. But that was important.
I'm getting emotional hearing this. Just like, tears of gratitude. When do you cry about this? Like, do you on the way back to your house? Are you having a cry? Like, are there private moments?
Yeah, there's a private moment. Sometimes when something comes up around Grace, or the lie, or people talk to me. Some people come and talk to me, just straight out of the blue, and and like when the gratitude they show, and I was just one of a team. And it's a big team, and but I do have my emotional moments, but it's in private.
Yeah. So when I think of Grace Millane, and this is probably the same with most people watching this or listening to this, I think of the photos that were shared. So there's one of her, it looks like she's wearing active wear with a baseball cap on. There's another one.
Up in the Bay of Islands.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, was it?
Yep.
And another one of her with her graduation cap and gown on. And both of them, one thing in common, massive beaming smile. Yeah. When you think of Grace Millane, what do you see?
I just see this happy, lovely girl who is so loved by her family. They were such a tight-knit, loving family. It was, and like, we haven't talked about it, but, when David was over here for the investigation, Gillian, she had had cancer, and she was undergoing chemotherapy treatment. So David's here dealing with his daughter, his only daughter, who's missing and circumstances aren't looking good. And yet the love of his life, his wife, Gillian, is at home undergoing chemotherapy. And he's having to deal with that. That's why we had to really wrap ourselves around it. Because, yeah, we just, how do you deal with that? And then you look at Gillian now. You know, she's had to keep living with the fact that Grace has been murdered. But then David dies, and it was the stress of cancer. So she now has two sons and grandchildren, but two of her close family, immediate family are gone. And as she says, she will never have them back. As much as she wants, she will never have them back. But she'll never stop loving them.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way she lost her daughter as well. No. Well, thanks for sharing that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tough. And there's, yeah, but I sort of see it. I see the sadness in a lot of the family photos' eyes, at homicide trials. Yeah.
When did you last speak to Gillian? Are you still in touch? Do you message? Or?
Yeah. We touch quite regularly, actually.
Yeah.
Like last year I was over in Europe and I went over to London and I stayed with Gillian for three, 4 nights, and which was really good. And it was good to catch up with her family and their local, in Essex, their local pub. There's someone who raised some money and put a big oak table with chairs, and chairs, one's David's, one's Grace's. And then you see what Gillian and her niece Hannah, so Grace's cousin Hannah, have done around the Love Grace campaign. And they got me to work in the garage packing handbags one day, which is fine. It's it's such a good cause. And in New Zealand now we have this Love Grace campaign, and there are thousands of handbags. So the women who are subject to domestic violence and have to get out with nothing, they have this handbag. And some of the letters that Gillian had shown me that they get, really touching. Sometimes these women just, had nothing, and then you give me this. Yeah.
I was going to ask you at some point what joy have you got out of this job, but I feel like it's almost a redundant question because I can probably answer it now. It seems like it's the connections you form with people at their potentially the most terrifying or the lowest point in their lives.
Yeah,
is that part of it?
Yeah, that is part of it. But I think it's what you do for the community, what you do for our victims, our complainants, our victims, what you do for the community, and it's all police staff. And we're a big team, and I look back on my career and we go, gosh, I'm so proud of that. And like as an example, during COVID, I was contacted by a woman who, when she was 9 years old, was being sexually abused in the home. I was a detective sergeant on the child abuse team, and during COVID, she had the courage to go and get, it was Child Youth and Family back then, the OT now, but get her file. And of course, and she got to me and said, your name's all through it. You either believed me, you saved me. And you go, oh. So I've met that girl, she's only 9 years old at the time. I've met her and her husband, and we catch up, and, like one of this, as I mentioned before, the sadness as the result of child sexual abuse can be, alcoholism, drug addiction, and all that. And, I see her and she's come through it the other end, and we catch up, and I just think, gosh, and I tell my staff times, it's what you do now can have a huge impact later for these complainants. And it does. And that is what, and when I look back at my career, I go, if I have helped someone come through life out of a tragic situation, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and often police will never know the impact they have.
No.
This has been we've been going an hour 48. I haven't even got the Instagram questions.
God.
It's been a big day for you.
Wow.
Some bad news this morning.
Yeah.
And, how are you going for time?
I'm fine.
You okay?
Yep, I'm fine.
Yeah. You can leave it anytime you want.
No. We've got to go home and run. Go do some exercise. No. That's right.
Are you doing much running? You said before you run.
I don't run as far now. I've just changed my whole exercise routine. And of course, at the moment, because I've had to go onto some hormone treatment for and do all the radiation, and that makes you a bit more tired. And so sort of, I don't have the same energy. And I think I should be faster than this, but I'm not. But I'm not.
It's age, you know.
Yeah, that's another
No
thing.
one escapes it.
I know.
Yeah, has fitness been like a big part of your sort of mental health strategy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Physically fit, mentally fit. That's what I've always believed in, and that's what I've always adhered to. And I've just, sometimes during cases, I just want to go for a run because it clears my head. It sweats out all the impurities, and I can think about that, and I feel so much better after exercise.
What about alcohol? Did you ever lean into alcohol?
Yeah. Well, when you're younger.
Coping?
Yeah, when you're younger. Not. I don't think I ever leaned in as a coping mechanism. Because I had my children. I had them when I was young, and they grew up with my children. We used to go running together. Like even one of my sons and I played the same senior men's football team together. Which is great. So, look, I drink and have a drink, but I don't, say it's a coping mechanism. Because of my health issues, I certainly don't drink. I drink 0% beer.
Yeah.
But
who do you unpack stuff with? Is it just like internally with work mainly?
I have my partner. I have my partner.
Yeah.
And we can talk and
your partner isn't your life partner or a work partner?
Well, no, my life partner.
Oh yeah, but you can't. There's things that you just can't really share, can you? Or...
Yeah, no. Well, I can talk about. I just had a day like sometimes it's just you go bang 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 bang. It might not be an investigation. There's a whole lot of emails come in. You got to do stuff and trying to mediate or negotiate or find out stuff. But like just talk and just get out and we do exercise together. Like one of the things I really like doing because I live close to the beach is kayak fishing. And
what do you like about it? Is it the solitude or
it's everything? It's just there's a bit of exercise, paddle to get out there, and then like I generally like because I'm an early riser, get out before sunrise. And so like about a month ago, I was on the water, and where there's the blood moon, big full moon, and so you have the moonlight on the water on one side, and on the other side, the sun's not up, but it's coming up, and you can see the orange haze on it. It's just beautiful. And then catch fish on, get some snapper, and you sit out there, and you're at one with nature. It's peaceful. It's just you can catch fish and then go in, and I really enjoy it.
How do you not have a huge weight of all the stuff you've seen and done? Like it's there's some really crunchy stuff, that you've experienced. How do you sort of compartmentalize that? Or
well, that's what I do. I try and compartmentalize. So work is work, home is home, family is family, sports is sport. And there is being to the psychologist, there's ways to cope. And one of the things, and it might not sound great, but we have a serious case. There's going to be another one. So don't, fall over this one because what about the next one? And then the next one. And unfortunately, that is our work. And you can go from homicide to homicide. But you've got to, this is a job as a file. One day it's also going to be filed. But at the time, we have a job to do. We have to be professional. We have to be thorough. And, we've got to investigate.
In terms of retirement, when you gave me
I look that young, that old, really?
No. Is there a thing in the place where they sort of kick you out at 65, or they start like pushing you towards?
No. Well, when they used to have you used to be able to perf at 55 because of the government superannuation, public police superannuation scheme. You can go on to ever, but I've got to look at the future, and I've got to say, I've done most things in the police. I really enjoy the level I'm at, because I'm still operationally involved, and I've got staff, get on well with staff. But life is like a ruler; it's only so long. And I've had some health scares. I'm going through another one now, but in terms of that ruler, I'm 2/3, 3/4 of the way through it. And so, what do I want to do? There's bucket list things I'm looking to do. Like I am thinking, I'm not convinced yet, to follow the All Whites at the World Cup next year. I'm riding my football. I know a number of the coaching staff there in Baisley and all those. And, I want to travel a bit more. I've got my grandchildren. I want to see them. Grow that,
How old are they now? How old are the grandkids?
Oh, well, I've got 15, 14 in a couple of weeks, 10 and 5.
Oh, cool age.
So, yeah, and that's, I've still got others to come because I've got some children who are married but haven't got children yet. Hurry up. No.
All right, from Instagram, someone wanted to know if you've seen the TV show Adolescence.
Yes, I have.
Netflix. Yeah. What are your thoughts towards that?
Okay, so we have our child exploitation team. We did a lot of online stuff. I'm also involved. My role is in Auckland City is oversight of our national persons of interest, and so some of the younger ones there can get into that incel stuff. That
Involuntary celibacy.
yes, yeah, that, and there's other groups that come out of that, and so it's very real, and I'm aware that some of that stuff has occurred in New Zealand with teenagers. It's not great, and it's difficult for parents because how do you know what your children are doing online? And that's the one thing. Maybe we need to just be a little bit more harder to know, because there are some manipulators out there across the world who will manipulate your children, and or the bullying online. You take sextortion. Like initially, people would take teenagers would take a naked photo of themselves and send it to someone who they thought was their age. It might have been, a 50-year-old pedophile at the end, or a relationship that breaks up, and so that person breaks up. I've got this photo. You pay me money. I'm going to really send it to all your friends. It creates stress. It's horrendous. We've actually seen some suicides as a result, of that bullying. So, I think the adolescence. I think parents watch it, and I've looked at a debate whether parents should watch it with their children or parents should just watch it alone. Some say they should watch it alone. Some say watch it with your children and talk to your children, because what you want your children to be able to talk to you about what's going on if they're getting bullied or getting pressured to do something, because they want to climb a hierarchical system in there. And to do that, you have to do something different, like say sextortion or blackmail someone, or So
But what can be done? Is this a job for like parents to speak to their kids when they're sort of intermediate age, or should the schools be doing some programming around that?
Well, I always believe that it starts with the parent. Yes, the school can support, but it does start with the parent. And dare I say it, there's a lot out there who have difficult childhoods, whether they don't have parents, a single parent, or whatever. I grew up never knowing my father, my mother's sole mother, until I was about 10, the stepfather came along. And it wasn't until my mother was dying of cancer, terminal, and my daughter wanted to find, who's your father, Dad? I don't know. Never met him. And she should have been a detective. She did some digging around. She did some digging around and found him. And she ended up meeting him. And then and then he said, basically said, he didn't believe he was my father. And I said, that's it. Walked away. But
how was that? Was it
pretty tough? That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Although I'd gone through my whole life not having a father. So I was an only child. So I had no brothers and sisters. My mother was from the UK. She had no family here. So that's why sport was really important to me. But I just accepted, okay, you've never been in my life. You've never shown any interest whatsoever in me. And that's what you say, that's fine. I've got my family. I'm looking after them. Bye.
Yeah, it's not like you're missing anything, but it's almost like double abandonment in a way.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It's really shitty. Yeah. When you retire, what will you miss most and least about the job?
Oh, what will I miss most? Oh, I think it's the companionship, the camaraderie. It's, like, so it doesn't matter what investigation, whether it's a homicide or, major case. It work as a team, and it's that teamwork. I really like that. And I've made some really good friends in New Zealand Police. So that's what I miss. What won't I miss? getting up at 4:30 to get to work. No.
Yeah,
To be fair, and the staff who listen to this are going to laugh at this. I won't miss the meetings because meetings do my head in, you know, particularly if they're meetings for meeting's sake. Some meetings are good and of value, but if I can get out of a meeting, they know I'll get out of one.
No one loves a meeting. Is that a side of police that most people would be surprised by? Like just how much BS and paperwork there is?
Yeah, I think, and the higher you go, you know, promotional rank wise, yeah, the more meetings, and I talk about political bullshit you have to deal with, but it's just no, and that's why I enjoy where I'm at.
Best and worst days on the job.
The best days, you know, it can be both getting a result for, say, a long-term investigation, whether it be a homicide, whether it be like the 10 in the milk powder. They're good, plus the guilty verdict or guilty plea, you know, because then you've done your job, you know you've done a thorough investigation. That they are really good days. The worst days, dare I say it, is hearing that a police officer's been killed. And take Matt Hunt, for example. My daughter went to primary, intermediate and secondary school with him. A lot of the people at the football club knew him because he'd grown up in our area. He'd actually been to my house to play, not that I knew that. And so I know a lot of his close friends, and you know, it just doesn't matter who, but it's really sad. It's just gut-wrenching.
And it's a reality of the job you're doing, isn't it?
It is.
Like you're putting yourself in harm's way on a daily basis. Yeah. Any regrets?
No regrets.
No.
I recommend the New Zealand Police. None of my children joined the police, but for me, I'm still in the police 45 years, like in a month's time. And
you calm down. You haven't made it yet.
yeah, I know. But no, I've just thoroughly enjoy giving back to the community. I enjoy, you know, being successful, being a leader, you know, working with the staff, developing the new staff.
From Instagram, do you take an interest in cases that you're not directly involved with, e.g. Polkinghorne, Scott Watson?
It depends. Like, obviously, Polkinghorne was run in the Auckland City District, so I had knowledge of that, you know, because I took the team that run it, and so I'm not into the weeds and the detail like I would be in other cases. The Scott Watson, the only reason I really took a real interest was because he had sailed past Great Barrier Island, and way back in '96, I'd been over there for a missing woman, Nancy Hershey Frey, and on the island 2 weeks looking for her, and he had sailed past the island. But to be fair, I have so much going on, at work, in my own work world, and then in my private life. Well, the football club. Well, I've stood down for president now for the club, so I didn't realise how much time it took up. But I'm wanting to get into with my partner, working with Hand in the Shame Back, doing more work to support the victims of child sexual abuse.
Yeah. Is there a time you feared for your life?
There was one time when I was in uniform, it was over in North Shore, and we'd gone to a domestic dispute at a house, and the guy started up a chainsaw and came at us with a chainsaw. And that's where fight or flight kicks in. And boy, I ran. I ran. So there was that. But I have had a situation where I didn't know at the time, but in a uniform, we'd stopped a car in the middle of the night and it took off. We chased it. It stopped in the back streets of Avondale. I get out. I'm the passenger. I walk up to the back passenger side of the car, and the car took off. And eventually, the car got stopped, caught, and the driver, the young guy, said they were going to rob a service station in the middle of the night, and they'd stopped. The fender in the back of the car had a sawn-off shotgun, and he said, "I'm going to shoot the pig," when he walks up, which was me. The young driver panicked and took off. So you have to live with that, and you don't know that at that time, but within a few hours, found out, and I had a little baby son at the time, and so that has an impact. You'd think, gosh, what could have been?
Do you tell your wife that?
at the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was in the news.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. For the partners, that's
Yeah, I've also before been in a domestic situation. The male's left and gone to another dress. We've gone to the dress, and there's a glass door, basically front door, and we knock on the door, and all you can see the shadow behind, and he's got a gun, and it's just I was in a sergeant. Yes, it's police, put the gun down, which he did. But yeah,
how long does it take you to come down after that?
when you're young, I don't think it takes as long as when you're older. You're older, you think about things a lot more. But look, it's there. It's happened. I know it's happened, and that's why I feel for some of the staff out on the street. What goes on now?
Yeah. What has been the most rewarding moment in your police career?
Gosh, there's a lot. I think when we have an award ceremony and the Grace Millane's investigation team got an award, and I got a commissioner's commendation. Wow. And it was also my 42nd year anniversary, and so you have this big we were at the race course, Ellerslie race course, and it was full, and the place was packed. The commissioner and the minister of police was there, and when they called my name out, and I come up, and the whole audience stood up and applauded. And it was just, it was quite emotional. But yeah, I just, oh gosh, there's lots of others who've done a lot of work in this job. I just happen to have a public media profile. There's others done great jobs.
Do you have like a pool room at home, or like a man cave, or a wall?
I've got a table to this table, but I put up occasionally. But yeah, my kids say I've got a shrine because we used to have an office, then we did open plan, so I can't put all my photos and stuff up. So I've got a little office which I call it the shrine, and all my photos, even from police college days and all that.
Yeah, how do you feel when you go in there and see that stuff?
Proud? Oh, I feel quite proud. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how can you not?
Yeah.
Someone wants to know cop shows on TV. Any favourites and any resemblance to real life?
I don't really watch them.
Oh yeah.
No, I like to watch sport on TV.
Yeah.
I do watch. I've got a case, and it's been in the media. A cold case. Alicia O'Reilly, a little 6-year-old girl who in 1980 was raped and murdered in a home in Avondale, and we're working on that, and we're going down the genetic genealogy path. So I'd like to watch some of the YouTube clips around genetic genealogy.
Do cold cases occupy much space in your mind?
Yeah, I've got a few. Yeah,
I suppose that's what you get when you're doing it.
Simon Bose, 1980, murdered in Gribblehurst Park. We did a bit of work on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not thinking about that when you're out kayaking, are you?
No. I'm enjoying the moment. I'm just enjoying being at peace, and particularly when the water's calm. There's no wind. You're just sitting there. It's just so peaceful. So come down.
That's good. You deserve that peace.
Yeah.
If you could give parents one tip to help keep their kids safe, what would it be?
It's difficult, but just be aware of a change in them, because what happens is people notice change in their children. They don't want to go to someone's friend's house anymore or something. They're just reacting. They're just changed. A lot of times it's because they've been abused. Not necessarily in their home. So, just if you see it, particularly the young children, if you see something that changes, be aware of that. Plus, dare I say, the technology, just have a little bit more conversation. I know it's difficult to talk to teenagers, but, what are they doing online? Just try and have a bit more knowledge about that, because, as I say, it lead down to horrible paths.
God, it's never been more difficult than it is now to be a parent, eh?
I know. I feel for them. As I say, I've got my children, I've got their children, and I think they do a fantastic job, but it's not easy.
You don't want to be like a control freak parent or a helicopter parent, but then, you got
to be careful of the policeman granddad. Yeah.
What are the greatest challenges police face on the front line today?
Look, I think it is the violence towards police. Yes, when I was younger, we had violence towards police, but now it's getting younger and younger. There's gratuitous violence out on the street, and it's also directed at police. And yeah, it's tough.
What do you hope your legacy will be, both within the police force and in the broader community?
Wow, what's my legacy? Yeah, I like to think that, police staff, we can be empathetic. We are human, and we can be empathetic, and we're out there doing our best. Yeah, as I said before, we don't always get it right, but there's a lot of things police staff do that the public will never see or never know. The death and tragedies that my staff have to attend, in one shift, one squad attended 3 suicides. They have to deal with that. That's why the counselling is important.
That was a very selfless answer. But the question was, what do you hope your legacy will be? And you managed to turn it into the broader.
Yeah, because I don't like
it a lot about you.
I don't
You're
want
a
it to be
deflector.
about me. I don't want it to be about me. I want it. Yes, I'm a policeman. Yes, I have a media profile. But the police in general, we're a team. The team wins. It's not, you won because of him. Yeah, you might have scored a goal. We'll try. But the team wins. And
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, when I said on Instagram you were coming in, there were some questions which we've just shared, but they were mainly just comments, and the words that sort of came up repeatedly were, I suppose, like kind, compassionate, and caring, which I think speaks volumes. Like if your kids or grandkids or people that know you better than anyone else had to come up with 3 words to describe you, what would it be? What would they be?
yeah, like I'm a disciplinarian. That's
It's my
that's what I
thing.
am. Yeah, but like see my granddaughters, and they just granddad, they come running up to me, and my partner just says, "You're so loving." They just love you so much, and I just think, just put yourselves in other people's shoes. Just be kind, be nice. Sometimes as a boss, I've had a bit harsher, but in general, like be kind.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to end it.
Yeah.
So what's next for you in terms of the health stuff?
12th of May, a month of radiation, and then see where it's going from there.
Did you just find that out this morning?
No. It was last year that my PSA levels started to go up. I don't have prostate, so PSA levels, because I get 3-monthly test, started to go up, tested again, and they'd gone over the line, and then they sort of stayed above the line, and that's where they sat. So, it was just, okay, you need to go and see the radiation oncologist, and it started from there. Now, okay, you need hormone treatment, radiation. And so, today was a planning day. So,
you ready for the battle?
Yeah, been there before.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is
Don't like losing.
Eh?
I don't like losing. I'm competitive, and even on the sports field, I don't like losing.
Hey, this has been so great today,
Yeah.
Detective Inspector Scott Beard. Thanks so much. You truly are a great New Zealander, and I can't thank you enough. We've been going backwards and forwards for maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
Even though your office is like 15 metres from here.
I know. And when we get the alarm goes off, we have to evacuate to come through. See it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I notice about you now that since we have offices just over the road. Whenever I've seen you, you just have this good energy. Like you bounce in, you're always smiling, you're always laughing, always happy, always lean and fit looking.
Yeah.
You're a great New Zealander. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you for that, Dom. It's been great. Yeah, and I just hope people will hear and take something from it, and particularly around the health stuff.
Yeah.
And mental health.
Well, thanks on behalf of me for being on the podcast today, and also on behalf of New Zealand for a lifetime of service.
No, thank you very much.